What historical event has not, but should be, made into a movie? Apollo 8. Basically the mission was originally only supposed to be a test of the lunar module in Earth orbit, but rumors were circulating that the Soviet Union were going to attempt to send a man into lunar orbit. Spoiler, this was not happening. As a result, Apollo 8 was switched to being the first mission to the moon, not to land but to orbit. And this decision was made only 6 months before the scheduled launch date, so it was a race to get everything ready before the flight. It's a historic mission that is almost never talked about, compared with Apollo 11, which is much more well known. The story of the Pan Am flight that got caught in New Zealand at the start of WWII and couldn't fly back home by going east because it was too dangerous. So instead they took their flying boat and flew west on routes they had to figure out from maps, pulled from borrowed encyclopedias, dodging the Japanese, and trying to find enough fuel to keep the plane going. The whole thing took months, culminating in taking off from a river in the Congo and having to skim along through a canyon to build up speed, since they were too heavy in order to even have a chance of crossing the Atlantic. The whole thing is tailor-made for TV or a film. There's a fantastic book written about the whole story called The Long Way Home, and was written with the captain of the flight. I need a Coen Brothers movie of the 1904 Olympic Marathon. Every sentence just keeps getting more bonkers. Over half of the 32 entrants did not finish the marathon. The marathon's first winner got his picture taken with the US president's daughter. Then it turned out that he cheated by hitching a ride in a car. The second winner had been doped with rat poison and was carried over the finish line by his friends. If he hadn't received immediate medical attention, he would have died on site. Multiple runners, including the winners of the previous 2 years' Boston marathons, got lung injuries from dust kicked up by the race officials' cars. The fourth place finisher got sick on the way, having stolen apples that turned out to be rotten from a nearby orchard. The ninth place finisher might have placed better if he hadn't been chased off course by wild dogs. One of the organizers believed that purposeful dehydration would help the runners and had deliberately limited the water sources available to the runners. The Nihor Incident. During the attack on Pearl Harbor, a Japanese Zero was damaged by anti-aircraft fire and crash-landed on the remote Hawaiian island of Nihor. The Hawaiians, initially unaware of the attack on Pearl Harbor, treated the pilot with generosity and respect. After news of the attack came out, the pilot was placed under guard. With the help of some sympathetic locals, the pilot broke out and took 2 hostages, Ben Canahal and his wife Ella. Later that night, Ben and Ella decided to fight their way out. Ben was shot 3 times, but still had enough strength to lift the pilot over his head and throw him into a brick wall. Ella, thinking her husband had been mortally wounded, killed the pilot by bashing his head in with a rock. Both Ben and Ella survived the incident and Ben was awarded 2 medals for his actions. Ella, who actually killed the enemy combatant, received no formal recognition. Oops, this was made into a movie, Enemy Within 2019. Syndrome K. In 1943, a hospital in Rome located next to a Jewish ghetto let Jews fleeing Nazi raids hide there. The professors in charge admitted Jews under the fake diagnosis of Syndrome K, described as a highly contagious and dangerous disease. This successfully kept the Nazis out of the quarantine wards and the Jews safe for the duration of the war. The Lioness of Brittany, medieval woman who led brutal attacks by land and sea against the French king in vengeance for the execution of her husband. From Wiki, it was her practice to leave at least one sailor alive to carry her message to the King of France. Reminds me of that scene at the beginning of Mulan. How many men does it take to deliver a message? Similarly, the rebellion of the Iceni against the Romans, led by Boudicca. Her husband was a Roman client king, but when he died his former territory was annexed by the Romans. Boudicca was flogged and her daughters raped. During her uprising, she burned Camurodunum, Colchester, and Londinium, defeated a significant part of the 9th Legion, and killed roughly 75,000 Romans and Britons, many by torture. Eventually, she was defeated and either committed suicide or died of an illness, but may have felt herself revenged. Sophie Blanchard was the world's first woman to become a professional aeronaut. She had an appointment from Napoleon Bonaparte. Her husband had been trying to make a living as a balloonist, but fell to his death deep in debt. Sophie had a knack for it, giving shows and crossing the Alps in a balloon. She specialized in night flights and set off extremely dangerous fireworks beneath her hydrogen balloon. At one point she nearly froze to death when her balloon went too high. Then she nearly drowned when her balloon landed in a swamp near Naples. After a 15-year career, she died in an aviation accident when her balloon caught on fire. Richard Rascala, the man who single-handedly saved 2,700 people in the South Tower during 9/11. A Vietnam vet, he was an adventure seeker before settling down at Morgan Stanley's WTC offices. He regularly held evacuation drills after predicting the previous explosives attack on the WTC, so he was prepared for 9/11. He evacuated his entire office against protocol and saved everyone but himself. He went back up shortly before the towers collapsed in search of survivors. Can't think of anyone better suited to play him than Tom Hanks. I hope this movie is made someday. The Arctic Balloon Expedition, 1897. 3 men from Sweden decided to be the first to reach the North Pole. But the balloon crashed in the harsh environment and the 3 men disappeared for 30 years before the expedition was discovered. With them was a camera and a diary containing details of the 3 months they fought for their lives, including killing and eating polar bears. Of course there's also photo proof of this. They seemingly survived for months on the ice, but mysteriously died one by one within days after they reached an island. One buried, one without legs, and the last one died in the open protecting the diary with his arms. In 1956, a man named Tommy Fitzpatrick stole a small plane from New Jersey for a bet and then landed it perfectly on the narrow street in front of the bar he had been drinking at in Manhattan. 2 years later, he did it again after someone didn't believe he had done it the first time. Here is an article about it. I feel like it could make for a fun comedy movie. The Roman Emperor Aurelian basically reconquering and restitching the empire back together after several decades of fragmentation, only to inevitably be betrayed and assassinated. Seriously, without him Rome dies a violent death in the 200s AD and world history looks totally different. The guy's nearly as impressive and significant as Julius Caesar, but is far less widely known. The Life of Mary Joseph Paulives Roch Gilbert du Motier, Marquis de Lafayette. Dude was a French noble that took part in the Revolutionary War for American independence. He became besties with George Washington and was there for most of the important parts of the war. Then when he was done there, he eventually went back to France and, being inspired by the Bill of Rights, sort of jump-started the events of the French Revolution and even at one point was asked to become dictator of France. The Story of Vulcan, a small town in West Virginia who had a collapsed bridge that the state and federal government refused to fix, so the township with no other options decided to call America's biggest rivals at the time, the Soviet Union and East Germany, to replace the bridge, and they actually did. So basically, a small town in West Virginia got so pissed off by America's lack of help that they decided to give a huge middle finger to the rest of the country by getting the Soviets to help them. The HMS Endurance. They were planning to cross from one end of the Antarctic to the other on foot, but their ship got frozen in the ice before they could make it to land. They end up living on the ice for months before the ice crushes their ship. Then they sail some of the most dangerous oceans in the world in 3 tiny life rafts through massive storms and land on a tiny speck of land without proper navigational equipment. Realizing this island wouldn't keep them safe long, the captain and 4 other men take a lifeboat on a journey of 800 nautical miles, survive a hurricane and a rogue wave, crash land on the wrong side of the island they were aiming for, hike over a mountain range that has since been successfully climbed less than half a dozen times due to danger, literally throw themselves off the top, to fall down a slope too steep to climb, jump down a waterfall, and only then make it to the local whaling station to get help. Out of the entire crew, there were no fatalities. A movie about the life and victories of Barbarossa would be great. How he started as a basic seaman, then led a pirate life, and then become the admiral who single-handedly established the Ottoman supremacy in the Mediterranean Sea for years. This movie would have pirate stuff, huge naval wars, Renaissance Italy and Europe, Ottoman Empire at its peak, Androdoria, Hunan courts, Suleiman the Magnificent and all the other things from this great era. The life of Herald Hardrada. The man was literally an excited prince from Norway, fled to Kiev, fell in love with the princess, was told he wasn't rich enough to marry her, became a mercenary for the Byzantines around the Mediterranean, became filthy rich, returned to Kiev, and married the princess, won back his kingdom, conquered his neighbors, and later died fighting in England, because he ran out of Scandinavians to fight. On second thought, I'm not sure that would all fit in a movie. Thanks for watching the video. For more content like this, please subscribe, like, and share the video and push the notification button.